segment from Lawyers Committee for Better Housing. As we resume our Tenant Thursday series in 2021, we want to wish you and your family a healthy and happy new year. Tonight, we will expand on the topic of fair housing as it applies to sources of income that renters use to pay their rent, and discuss how voucher holders can enforce their rights under these fair housing protections. This episode is part 2 of the episode we did on December 10th. So if you have not seen that episode, we will link to it in the comments section of this video so you can easily watch that video later as well. My name is Alan Haley, and I'm the Development and Communications Director at Lawyers Committee for Better Housing, or LCBH. And before I introduce our guest tonight, I want to take a moment to thank Alex Escobedo, who is LCBH's Communications and Events Vista Coordinator. Alex will be leaving LCBH next week as his Vista term is ending. We are very sad to see Alex go and want to thank him from the bottom of our hearts at LCBH for all the incredible work he has done on Tenant Thursdays and other LCBH initiatives. So thank you, Alex. Tonight, we are joined by Aileen Flanagan, Senior Attorney here at LCBH, Sarah Delgado, Community Engagement and Education Manager at Chicago Area Fair Housing Alliance, or CAFA, and Catherine Johnson and Michael Chavaria from Housing Choice Partners, or HCP. CAFA is a membership-based consortium of fair housing and advocacy organizations, social service providers, government agencies, and municipalities committed to the value of fair housing, diversity, and integration. CAFA's mission is to combat housing discrimination and promote equitable place-based opportunities through education, advocacy, and collaborative action. Sarah facilitates the Housing Choice Voucher Working Group, which is a collaborative of voucher participants, advocates, and housing authorities. They work to identify barriers to stable, healthy housing in the communities HCV participants would like to live. HCP is a 25-year-old Chicago-based nonprofit rental housing advocacy and counseling service provider that helps families with low incomes overcome discriminatory barriers that limit access to housing. In particular, HCP provides resources and support to families utilizing vouchers and looking to move from areas of high poverty to neighborhoods with increased opportunities for upward mobility, such as well-performing schools, job and transit options, and healthy social and physical environments. Please take a moment to provide your vote and provided comments. We are better able to understand what trends and concerns are more prevalent in your area, which allows us to create segments that specifically address your concerns. If you have any immediate concerns, please go to rentervention.com or call 312-347-7600. So now to begin our program, our first question, which is directed to Aileen Flanagan, is what is fair housing?
Thanks, Alan. Thank you for introducing us and welcoming our guests. I'm thrilled to have so much subject matter expertise with us tonight. So I think you will all really learn a lot of really helpful and very relevant information. I just want to mention one thing, because I think we were having a drop, maybe it was just me, but a drop in coverage for a second when Alan was saying, if you see the request in your pop-up to ask you about your ward information, we collect that information so that we can provide you with better, more timely and precise Tenant Thursday talks. So please, if you can, take a minute to enter in your ward information so that that can help us get better information to you. So again, getting back to your question, sorry, Ellen, what is fair housing? Well, generally, fair housing is the legal right of all people to live wherever they choose, to have access to housing, seek, purchase, sell, lease, or rent, and enjoy the full use of their homes without unlawful discrimination, interference, coercion, threats, or intimidation by either owners, landlords, real estate agents, or any other person that has some power or control over your housing. So question, it's the lawful protections that are in place to protect your right to fair housing.
Thank you, Aileen, for that. Next question is, what is discrimination?
So these are some of the big questions, the broad-based questions. Essentially, discrimination, it means to distinguish. Discrimination is just distinguish or single out or make distinctions about things. But what we're going to talk about tonight is unlawful discrimination, and it refers to the unfair or unequal treatment of a protected individual or group of individuals based on certain characteristics like age or disability or race. And these protected people are people that share common characteristics that tend to historically or currently lend themselves out to be mistreated or singled out and mistreated, treated differently by society generally at large, by people who have power over their well-being.
And Aileen, what is source of income discrimination?
And that is the topic we're going to talk about tonight. So that's a type of discrimination directed at people who are of a particular class, people that pay their rent in specific ways, that are potentially going to be mistreated or excluded from housing because of the way they pay their rent. So under the Chicago Fair Housing Ordinance and the Cook County Human Rights Ordinance, landlords and their agents cannot refuse to lease or sell or rent or otherwise deny or withhold from any person or persons or group of persons accommodations because of the way they pay their rent. The source of income is the lawful manner that people use to support themselves or their dependents and pay rent.
Thank you, Aileen. And now that we have that sort of background for our conversation tonight, our first question, which is for Sarah Delgado from Chicago Area Fair Housing Alliance, or CAFA. Sarah, what are some examples of source of income discrimination, and what does it look like to renters?
Yeah, thanks, Aileen, for that introduction, and thanks, Alan. Source of income discrimination can look a variety of ways. Like Aileen said, it's whatever your lawful means of paying your rent. You can't be denied housing or discriminated against because of that way that you pay rent. So for some folks, that's because they receive disability or Social Security. They may receive veterans benefits. They may have a housing voucher or some sort of subsidy that helps them pay their rent. It could be including whatever type of income that folks use to pay their rent, including that in a landlord's calculation of when they look at your income of whether or not you can afford the unit and meet their guidelines. So unfortunately, in my experience, source of income discrimination runs really, really rampant in our community. Personally, the type of discrimination I see the most in our community is against folks who use housing choice vouchers. Some people call it Section 8, but anyone really who is using a housing subsidy, that is additional money that they're using to pay their rent. That is the type of discrimination I see the most of in the Chicago area. And it can look a myriad of different ways. The most obvious show of discrimination is outright refusal because of that form of payment. So it could be simply stating in an advertisement, no Section 8. It could say, we do not take vouchers. It could say anything that says basically to you, the renter, this means that you're using to pay the rent. I'm not going to use it. I'm not going to allow you to use it here. So sometimes that looks like not Section 8 approved. While they're not explicitly saying they don't take Section 8, they're implying that they don't meet the guidelines for someone who uses a voucher to rent there. That is technically discrimination against someone who is using a voucher to pay their rent. It could also happen, this kind of obvious discrimination, outright refusal to rent. It happens amount indicating in an email, in a text message. That's kind of the outright discrimination. But it can look a variety of other ways too. We see folks, let's say someone who is using a voucher tells the landlord that they use a voucher, and the landlord says, well, we don't have any units available in the building you're interested in, but we do have units available in this building that you didn't indicate you're interested in over here. We call that steering, when they take folks who are using one kind of source of income, like a voucher, and putting them all in one area or one building, or maybe even one floor or one side of a building. That, like Aileen said, that's prohibiting folks using a voucher or that source of income from the same use of the building and of that community as anybody else would. So that's a form of source of income discrimination.
And Sarah, if someone experienced a source of income related type of discrimination, or perhaps thinks they were discriminated against based on their race or gender, how should they document that experience?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'll say that there are all sorts of ways that discrimination looks. So if you, sometimes it's not always obvious, it's not always said out loud or written down. Sometimes it's kind of a feeling that you might be treated differently because of your source of income. It can be just a hunch that somebody else you know who didn't use that same source of income got different treatment. It might be that you think they're adding additional requirements or fees to your application, or rules to you because of your source of income. Whatever the case may be, write everything that you think or feel, or the things that indicated to you that something was not right, write it down. And in general, what we tell folks, just kind of a handy tool in general, especially when you're searching for a unit, is always just keep track of the units that you're looking at, who you spoke to, their name, maybe their title if you know it, if they're the landlord, if they're the property manager, what day you spoke to them or emailed them or texted with them. So I think it's the address and what happened, what was said. That way, if later on, when you're thinking back on your experience and you thought, oh, something is off about that, I wonder, it doesn't always hit us right away. You can go back to your record. It's also just handy when you're looking for housing in general to have that kind of record to remember who you spoke to and when about what apartment. So I would definitely start there.
Can I ask you a question? Do you think it's helpful to take a picture maybe of the application that you filled out? Because I wonder how many questions are on applications themselves, or like documents that they let you look at, but you don't necessarily get to keep a copy of that, because there might be some things going on in those documents that aren't right. Is that right?
That's a good point, Aileen. Anything that you sign, especially, or fill out, if you are unable to keep a copy of it for yourself, that's a great point. Maybe take a screenshot on your computer or take a picture with your phone. It's a really good point. And if you had somebody with you, like you brought a relative or a friend with you to view the unit or talk to the manager, they could be a witness later on if this turns into a claim, and have them, make sure that they know what's going on too, so that you can ask them to help you out if you need a witness later on.
And if I could just add, so that's all like great information. I think that's a fantastic idea, Aileen, taking a photo. I never thought of that before. One thing I often recommend is sometimes the denial, the illegal discrimination, it took place over the phone, right? So they call you up and say, oh, we're not going to work with the housing authority. I hear that one a lot. Or I don't want to deal with the housing authority. I did that once before. It's hard to prove what someone said to you, right? So what I always recommend is, hey, just follow up with a quick email or a text message. Hey, what was that again? Why didn't I qualify? See if they respond. Often they do. I meet people, I mean, a lot of landlords are able to somehow discriminate in writing. So get it in writing. It will make your case easy. It'll make it easy to find an attorney that'll take your case, or to win a case without an attorney. So always try and get it in writing.
Yeah, that's a good point, Michael. In text or an email. In fact, and I think Michael and Catherine, you might go over this later. I know someone who always, after she meets or speaks with the landlord in person, emails them to let them know that she has a voucher, so that their response is recorded. Whatever their response is, it's recorded in writing. So that's a really good point. Thanks, Michael.
Well, these are really great suggestions you all are making, Michael and Aileen and Sarah. Are there ways that you would recommend someone conduct a housing search to be able to best utilize the source of income protection?
I can take that one. Catherine, please jump in at any point. I know you got this down solid. I think one of the most important things to be able to ensure that you can utilize and have your source of income rights recognized is to know your rights, which is kind of what anyone who's viewing this now is doing, right? You can't hold a landlord accountable if you don't know what your rights actually are. So obviously everyone's doing that right now. Another thing I like to, when I was kind of preparing for this conversation tonight, I was kind of thinking about, I often see individuals who are renting and utilizing a voucher asking the landlord if they accept the voucher. And my recommendation would be to kind of like turn that over and be more assertive. And instead of asking if they accept a voucher, just ask for the application, right? Because they don't get to accept. There's no choice for them. If you meet the other criteria, the unit should be yours theoretically, as long as everything's going right. And remembering that really, it's not, will you take the voucher? The voucher isn't a barrier. It's actually an opportunity, because if you have a voucher, it means you wouldn't have qualified for that unit without it. So that what the voucher is actually doing is creating an opportunity. So we always recommend to kind of think about the positives and focus on the positives. And then the other thing is, just really making sure you're staying within the program guidelines. So if you're looking, make sure when you're looking that you're looking at units that actually fit within the housing authority's payment standards. Because if you're denied, it's not necessarily discrimination if the landlord knows that the housing authority would never have approved the rent amount, right? So just making sure that you have all the information you need right out the door. And then, we always say, don't talk about the voucher until you get to the application, which kind of goes hand in hand with the piece I was saying a moment ago. I'm curious, Catherine, did you have anything to add to that?
Well, I just want to reiterate what Aileen and Sarah already said about staying organized and keeping track of your housing search information. I always advise families to, get a notebook, a special notebook, and like be able to really go back to your searches and your phone calls and everything. Even if you do it by text, you may want to organize it all so that you can easily assess it when you need to, if you need to.
Yeah, and to that point, very soon, within the next couple of weeks on Housing Choice Partners website, we'll have available to anyone who goes to the site a sort of rental search guidebook where you can track all the information. It's more designed for you to track the things you care about, things like how much are the utilities, how much is the application fee, so that you can keep track of like what you're actually looking for. But also it has some space there for you to keep track of the info you would need if you decided or needed to file a discrimination complaint. It's not so, no one should be expecting to run into discrimination, but like Sarah mentioned, voucher discrimination happens all the time. And this, it's gonna be a free thing. You can just print out, stop by our office and grab a copy, whatever it is. It'll be available real soon.
Catherine, what should someone do if their application is wrongly rejected due to income requirements?
Well, first of all, they would need to ask and try to get in writing why the application was denied. And if it was because of income, they would need to make sure that the landlord understood that their voucher would also be considered income. Did I miss something, Michael? Go ahead and jump in if you need to.
Yeah, so actually, I was recently speaking to a colleague of mine, Samantha, and she has this. She's like an expert on the application piece with the voucher, and you know, what we're recommending is that you save the conversation around the voucher until that application. Don't say it ahead of time. Get it to the application point, but be upfront about it at the application, because your landlord might have reasonable special instructions. Oftentimes applications are not designed. There's no question on there, do you have a housing subsidy? So the true value of your housing subsidy is kind of lost in this poorly designed application. So the landlord might say, hey, this is the part in the application I need you to mention the voucher. Or they might say, what I need you to do is to upload or send me a picture of the voucher with your voucher number. They might, because you have a different type of income, there might be some steps that actually strengthen your application. But again, you want to save mention of the voucher until you're asking for the application. And then when you're actually filling it out, we recommend that you list the first income. You get to that income spot, don't list, your wages from employment, list the voucher, because oftentimes that's the biggest thing. And right out the door, when the landlord's reviewing that application, they're not even going to care about the rest of the income, because they're going to know the voucher's got it covered, right?
Hey, I got a question about that.
Mhm.
Because I've always wondered, like, you know how they say your income has to exceed 30% of the rent? So even if you include the voucher as part of your income may not exceed 30% of the rent, right? So.
Well, you mean 3 times the rent?
That's what I meant. Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm not a numbers person.
So really, it shouldn't be possible for you to earn 3 times the rent and qualify for a voucher.
Exactly.
You wouldn't get the voucher if you earn 3 times the rent, which is why these applications are really not designed to qualify a voucher holder, which is why you have to really be upfront with the landlord right out the door. And if they make a mistake, you got to, if you're comfortable with it, if your personality allows it, confront them. You have the information, you're an expert on how the voucher works, you can educate them. Oftentimes they need that. If that's not your thing, if you're a little more reserved, makes total sense. I don't know if I would do that. Also, you're going to live with this person. Do you really want to push on them like that? That's when you can call someone like me, Catherine, Sarah. We get paid to do this. Give us a call. I'm happy to jump on the phone. I don't want to throw Sarah out there. I don't know, but I'm happy to jump on the phone. I talk to landlords all the time, and try and get through those misunderstandings. It's more times than not, it's a landlord not knowing. It's not malicious.
And
then
Michael,
one other thing I just want to add: make sure that you also know your payment standards, what your voucher is worth. In Chicago, there's a standard, and then there's another amount if it's a mobility area. And then if it's the suburban Cook County, then it's the payment standard is by zip code. So you want to make sure that you know those amounts. Again, if you don't know your payment standards, you can call our office. You can look on the websites to get that information.
And to Catherine's point, that's also going to save you money. You don't want to pay an application fee for a unit that was outside of the payment standard. So it's in everyone's best interest to have that info at the front of your mind.
And Catherine, would you mind sharing the website and the phone number if folks are listening to this part and want to know how to get in touch with you guys?
Yes, it would be Housing Choice Partners, www.housingchoicepartners.com.
Thank you.
And Aileen, I wanted to jump on something that you mentioned, the 3 times the rent. I didn't mention explicitly in the different types of discrimination, but that's something that comes up all the time. You're right. So many landlords ask that's just part of their questions, part of their application process is that you make 3 times the rent. And like Michael said, a lot of their processes are just not set up for voucher holders. So a landlord actually should not be asking you to make 3 times the rent. They can apply a similar standard, but only to your portion of the rent. So if you're a voucher holder, you know that you only pay a certain portion of the rent and that the housing authority subsidizes the rest. And if your portion of the rent is, you know your portion of the rent that you will be expected to pay, hopefully, the housing authority calculates that for you. The landlord can only ask you to make 3 times that amount. If your portion is 0, then the landlord should be applying 3 times the rent to 0, which is 0. So they shouldn't be applying that to you at all, since your rent is subsidized by the housing authority. But even I push back on that with landlords, because if someone does have income, they're expected to make 3 times the rent, and a landlord is wary of that changing. That is the real beauty of having a voucher, is that if you have a decrease in income, the housing authority picks up the rest. They change their standards. So I really push back on the 3 times the rent rule in general with landlords.
So, and if I could build on that, if that's all right. There is one thing, there's like a kind of a hiccup in the 3 times the rent, right? And if someone runs into this and there's a landlord who's fighting back, again, reach out to this. I just shared my info. I'm hoping it translates to the Facebook. I'll share the documents. I mean, there's documents straight from the county that make it crystal clear you can't do this. And that sometimes is all it takes to get a landlord to change their policy. But what I wanted to say was it's the situations when you have, if you don't have any income. And I think we were hoping to talk about this later, but I'll just touch on it real quick. Landlords can require you to have some income even when you have a voucher, right? Because they want to make sure you can pay the utilities. And so I just wanted to kind of connect that to the 3 times the rent. It's sort of a hiccup. I hope that doesn't overcomplicate things, but I think I'm hoping we'll have a chance to talk about it soon.
Sure. Catherine or Michael, one of the other questions that we have for you guys is, can someone be denied because of their credit score if they have a voucher?
Yes, they can be denied if their credit score does not meet the requirement, as long as the landlord is not making an adjustment or any difference in their application or the requirement for that voucher family. As long as it's across the board, they can still be denied.
Okay. So you guys were talking about the amount that the voucher holder has to pay, and that it's based on a portion of their income. What if I have 0 income and the housing authority pays the full rent? Can a landlord deny someone based on having no income?
Sure. So I'll touch on that since I just kind of addressed that a little bit. So yeah, so it's in the landlord. It's very reasonable, and it's actually legal for the landlord to require you to prove some income. And I think everyone would kind of understand when you think about utilities. For example, the landlord wants to make sure their renter that they're working with has the ability to keep the heat on, because if the heat goes off, then the pipes could freeze. And now the landlord's going to have to pay to keep that tenant in a hotel and thousands of dollars to repair pipes. So the law is pretty clear that they can require some stuff, but they can't require you to like prove that you're going to afford all the things that they afford, right? We've heard that they want to know that you can put all this food on the table and afford their grocery bill, all these things. That's not reasonable. The only thing that's reasonable is proof of the ability to support the rental housing. And And then, we do have some recommendations around how to be successful when you have no income but a voucher. But I think Catherine would be best to answer that if that's okay.
Yeah, so we would recommend, a family, if you know that you already have your current income is zero, you may want to look for units where you have very little or no expenses. So searching for a unit where you only have to pay your light bill or no electric at all, no water, no heating, and things like that, that will get you around the landlord wondering if you're able to, maintain that unit. We also would recommend, if you have family or friends that's giving you frequent contributions, that you start to document it, like have them send that money to your account so that you may be able to show that as, that you have some money on hand. Because we do have a lot of families that report contributions. And so we want to make sure that landlords also consider that, because housing authorities, they consider the contributions that families receive from family members and friends.
And if I can add, if you don't have a bank account, right? If you don't currently have income, it's probably difficult to maintain a bank account. If you don't have a bank account, you can, if it's okay, if this is how the relationship is, ask the person who's helping you out. Can you, instead of giving me cash, can you give me a money order so I can save that slip and prove that this is consistent? Could you write me a check? Some way to prove that it's consistent. It could be helpful not just with renting, but with all sorts of other types of credit you might apply for or anything like that.
And I also thought, like, why not be able to monetize some of those benefits that you might be receiving too? Like, supplemental food income, things like that. Couldn't you use that to help demonstrate that you are sustainable?
Right, and you could also even, use the, if you are getting assistance from CETA, that's also another one.
Yeah, and I used to work on a program where I worked for a nonprofit agency, and we would take applications that help with emergency housing costs, and we always considered that. I mean, we were a nonprofit, we were advocates, so we were super flexible. If we ran into a wall, we figured out a way to climb over it. But as the renter, you have a lot of tools at hand to like really document this, like with the LIHEAP. You're gonna get that. If you have SNAP benefits, you can show that. I mean, there's just so many ways to do it. And if you have questions, call us. We're happy to advise like on a specific situation.
Yeah. And one additional thing on that is if you don't have a paper trail of checks or money orders or things like that, some landlords, even if you demonstrate you're organized, every time you're getting that money from a family member or friend that's helping you out, you're writing it down in, a specific place every single time, the date, how much, and you can show that you're organized and you're keeping track. Some landlords, that's enough for them. They see that you're really serious about this and you're keeping track of it, and they just like to see it. So sometimes that will even work with the landlord.
Does a landlord have to hold open of the CHA?
Okay, so I think you were breaking up a little bit there, Alan. We were dropping you, and I think you were talking about holding the unit open for the duration of the process, the inspection process, all those steps, right?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I thought it was dropping a little.
Oh, sorry about that.
I'll try to answer that. Okay. So the short answer is no. They don't have to hold the units during the entire leasing process, but it's expected that landlords do in good faith. Once they complete the request for tenancy approval, or sometimes they're referred to as moving documents or moving papers, we expect landlords to hold the properties until the inspection and the entire leasing process is complete. And if you have an indication, or if you feel that a landlord is not going to hold the property, we advise that you know, try to get the landlord to hold to take a holding fee from you. I would say no more than $50 to $100 to hold that unit in good faith for you during the leasing process.
Catherine, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, real
Michael.
quick, with the holding fee, put it in writing. Make sure it's in writing before you give them that money that they're holding it for you. And if you put it in writing, try and make sure it's refundable. Like if the deal falls
Right.
through for a reason outside of your control, make sure you get it back. I think of it just like, you know, when you buy a house, you make an offer to the person selling the house and you give them some amount of money so that they know that you're like serious and you're not gonna waste their time and make them miss another offer. It's the same thing. Make sure you get it back and make sure it's guaranteed in writing. I would also add one thing, know the program that you're working with, that the voucher is through. Like if you're in the city of Chicago and you're looking at a mobility area, so let's say like Beverly, you're looking at renting a house in Beverly, and it's in a mobility area, that means the CHA will pay the landlord incentive payment. So they're going to essentially give the landlord an additional 1 month's rent in recognition that they have to kind of keep the unit off the market for a while in an area that will probably rent really quickly. So they're compensating them for that. So make sure that you fully inform the landlord and all the reasons why they want to keep it off the market while you go through the process.
Thank you both. And Catherine, maybe to piggyback on that question about the process with CHA or HACC, what should someone do if the landlord says that the unit will not pass inspection?
Well, there are a couple of things that's involved with that question. With that, I would think the best thing to do is to, you know, think about what, you know, if you've already seen the unit, if you were able to see the unit, compare it to your inspection checklist. All of the voucher holders receive an inspection checklist. And they may want to just like think about how the unit looked and then think about the things that are required on the inspection checklist. It could be a fair housing violation. And I will let Michael pick up on that to explain if it's a possible fair housing violation.
Yeah, so I would say, I mean, what you said, Catherine, is like, I mean, it's just such good advice. Think about what you saw, like, but, you know, really, this goes to the comment earlier about, you know, ask them in writing for, you know, why they were denying you. With the inspection, don't just say, oh, they said it won't pass, I'm going to leave it alone. It could be an excuse, or it could just be that they're misinformed and they think that the inspection requirements are, you know, requiring these crazy things that aren't real. So ask them, you know, you should be informed. Like Catherine said, you have that inspection checklist, ask them what it is. And right off the bat, when they start listing things, that'll also tell you as a renter, oh, I don't want to live at a house with all these problems. Like, I'm not going to deal with this at all. So it could save you time. But when they say it, it could be a lie, right? Landlords know how to get away with discrimination. That's why it's still going on. So, you know, kind of in this situation, I really recommend kind of like trusting your instincts. If you think they're lying, you know, ask them what's wrong with it and then take legal action, right? You have a right to take legal action. They've disrespected you. They've wasted your time. They've prevented you from moving, and maybe you need to move because of an emergency and it's causing you additional issues. You have the right to be made whole. You have the right to be compensated for being discriminated against. Reach out to one of the advocacy organizations that were dropped in the comment section, or you can file a complaint right by yourself. It's very, very simple. And when you're doing it in the city of Chicago, the commission that handles those complaints, they're just fantastic to work with. They'll make sure you do everything right, even if you're doing it on your own. So I really just recommend trusting your instincts. I do want to say, I felt like Sarah was going to say something a few moments ago. I don't want to lose that.
Actually, it fit in perfectly with this question about inspections. You know, this idea of using an inspection as a way to discriminate. Another way that sometimes we see landlords discriminating against voucher holders is failure to work with the housing authority. So, you know, telling you the unit might not pass the inspection is one thing, or, you know, they may allow you to go through the whole process, but just keep failing to show up when the inspector comes. They keep missing appointments, which is wasting your time, it's wasting the housing authority's time, and they're just kind of willfully not complying with the process. That can be a fair housing violation. So it doesn't always look like a landlord saying, I don't take Section 8. It can be not complying with the process and just making it longer and hard. And that's, you know, if you're a voucher holder, that's just time you don't have. So I just wanted to put that out there as well.
Any recommendations from the panelists about how someone should talk about the voucher program with landlords? How do you make it sound good and break through the stigma?
Yeah, I'll give that a first go and then pass it from there. You know, the first thing, and I think I've said this a couple of times, it's really, we have to acknowledge that there is this stigma. It's not justifiable, it's not right, and honestly, it is stemming from racism and classism, and it's as simple as that. It is wrong that there's this stigma, but it's also something that gets in the way with locating housing. So we have to acknowledge it. It's just the way it is. And with that, you know, one thing we say is, you know, don't use the term Section 8. Because that's really where the stigma is associated with, right? It's, you know, I remember in the 90s, all of the headlines about Section 8 and all the negativity. So there's modern terms like voucher, housing choice voucher, use those as a recommendation. And then, you know, if you get into a conversation, you know, it's not uncommon for a landlord to ask you why you're moving. Keep it really positive. Like if you're moving because your current landlord sucks, and they're a slumlord, or because there's mold in your unit, don't talk about that. Don't associate the voucher with lesser quality units or with bad landlords, because now the landlord's gonna think, oh, well, if I take a voucher, then I'm like that. Just keep it positive. And if you have had a voucher for a while, you know, talk about a landlord you worked with who really enjoyed the program. You know, just keep it positive and really educate yourself on all the benefits of the program. But I'll pass the mic to Catherine because I think she's got some probably some really good advice here.
Okay, well, thanks, Michael. You covered a lot. I would just add to that that, you know, the voucher is, you know, has been very beneficial to many families and continues to like provide, you know, housing for families. And I just think that, you know, learning to tell that story, learning to tell, you know, your story, and it can be the same story to, you know, numerous of landlords, but just, you know, weighing in on how that voucher has been, you know, so helpful to your family. You can tell about a time when you know, really needed it and how it has been like just a stepping stone for you and your family. So I would just say build on, you know, like telling your story, selling yourself to landlords. And as Michael said, stay positive, be confident, you know, don't go into it looking like it's, you know, it's not going to work. Be confident, and because it is providing a great value to you and your family to have that voucher. So that's all I would like to add.
And I just wonder what you think, Michael and Catherine, but something we talk about a lot lately is that a voucher is recession proof. You think that's a good talking point up front with landlords?
I definitely do, especially in this moment. I can see that Catherine's ready to say something, but I was actually talking to a colleague today who has seen discrimination against vouchers decrease recently. And the reason that we're thinking it's happening is because right now landlords are in a situation where they don't know what the economy is going to look like. And they, you know, if I were a landlord, I would preference renters using vouchers, because I know if they lost income, lost their job, became sick, the voucher is going to cover it. That's the best security deposit you can have is guaranteed rent.
I would just agree with all of that, Michael, and that's a good point, Sarah. I know we said it earlier, just because, you know, that voucher, it's recession proof and it's guaranteed rent. And so that's a big advantage. And to utilize that now, I think is a good thing that voucher holders can do. So I agree.
Question for I think for Sarah. In describing CAFA's work, there's a working group on vouchers that is part of CAFA. Is that something that our viewers can get involved in?
Absolutely. So our working group, the full working group, as I mentioned, or I think you mentioned earlier, Alan, is collaboration of voucher participants, advocates, so that's sometimes social service providers, it's legal aid providers, it's fair housing organizations, and the housing authorities at Cook County and the CHA. It came together to kind of look at barriers specifically around discrimination, but barriers that voucher holders face when accessing the housing in the homes and the communities they'd like to live in. The working group has two participant boards. So participants in the voucher program, either in Cook County or in the city of Chicago, are on the board that they kind of dictate the work of the working group. So the priorities that they have, that's what the working group works on. And we are always looking for more people to be a part of the group. I would be so excited if you contacted me and would like to learn more and just talk about the group or want to be a part of it. A lot of what we work on is policy work. There's policies within the PHAs that we talk about. There's outright discrimination, there's education, there's accessibility needs that folks are facing. There's a lot of work to be done. And so if you're interested, please do contact me, Sarah Delgado, at the Chicago Area Fair Housing Alliance. My email is sdelgado@cafha.net, and I think that's going to be dropped into the comments. Yeah, so please do reach out to me, even if you're kind of interested and you just want to learn more. Drop me a line. I'd be happy to chat with you.
Is there, you see a question in the chat about geographic protections as regards source of income? I hope I'm phrasing that question right. Is that something you could address, Michael?
Yeah, so I don't have them all memorized. I was trying to flip over and I got hit with a paywall. I couldn't get past this paywall to get the list. But so these protections are Cook County, right? So if you're in Cook County, you have these protections. You cannot be discriminated against or treated differently solely because you utilize a voucher. The caveat there is Chicago also has the protection. So if you're discriminated against in Chicago, you have to file the complaint with the Chicago Commission. If you're discriminated against in Cook County suburbs, you have to file the complaint with the Cook County suburbs, right? But again, you can just contact one of us advocates and we'll help you navigate all that. That's not something you should have to memorize. Well, that's what we're here to help with. But then even if you go down south a little bit, you have this protection. And someone please correct me if it's either Champaign or Urbana. I forget which one has the protection. And then there's a few other like northwestern suburbs that have this as well. Naperville is split between Will and Cook County. So all of the city of Naperville has this protection regardless of the county you're in. And then if there is, do you know, Sarah, is it Urbana or Champaign or both?
I think it's Champaign, but if someone was in that area, again, they could reach out to us and we would make sure you'd find the correct jurisdiction to file a claim in. Yeah.
You can always reach out to your local legal aid like Prairie State. If you're watching from one of those communities, please reach out to your local legal aid organization, either Prairie State Legal Services or Land of Lincoln if you're further south.
I have a question for the group, which is a slightly different example of a possible source of income discrimination. As many of our viewers probably know, the state of Illinois has a homelessness prevention program, and funds can be used to pay utility bills and other things, but those funds can also be used to pay back rent. I'm curious if a landlord who might be moving to evict a tenant, can they refuse to accept those funds to pay back rent, and would that be a source of income discrimination?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Something that's come up a lot in our discussions recently. So in the jurisdictions that Michael talked about, so, you know, for us, we're mostly working in Cook County in the city of Chicago, like you said, Naperville, and there are a couple other jurisdictions in the state that have specifically source of income protections. In those jurisdictions, that payment is a source of income and should be accepted by the landlord. I will say that a landlord's policy on how they accept payments, sometimes the landlord, their policy is to apply any kind of payment, like you said, to the most delinquent month, so back rent. Sometimes the landlord applies it to the most recent rent. So they would apply it, they're supposed to apply it in the same way they would apply any payment that is made. So it's not, I wouldn't say they have to use it for back rent, but they need to use it like they would any other kind of payment towards rent or fees, because it is a source of income. But it is complicated if that's a state funding source, but source of income is not protected in the entire state of Illinois. So like Michael mentioned, just in those jurisdictions that have those protections, could that be used as a source of income? Unless other folks had more information on that. That's my understanding right now.
So I don't have anything to add to that. I mean, that was spot on. So in the jurisdictions where there's this protection, it's illegal to deny those. A really big program that just happened was the Illinois Housing Development Authority's Emergency Rental Assistance Program. That's a super long and lengthy, jumbled up bunch of words. Basically, it was a recent program that provided $5,000 in rental assistance. We heard stories of landlords refusing to complete their very brief portion of the application, which just totally stopped a renter from applying, right? Because the landlord had to input some info to prove that there's a landlord involved and money owed, and landlords were refusing to do that. In Cook County, Chicago, Harwood Heights, Naperville, Urbana, and Wheeling, where there are these protections, that was against the law. They refused, just like with refusing to cooperate with housing authority requirements, they refused to cooperate with the application requirements. And they illegally denied that source of income in those 6 places where it's illegal. Chicago.
How is that enforced, Michael? How is that enforced?
So you would contact one of the advocacy groups, but it's enforced under, so if it happened in Chicago, and this is confirmed by through conversations with the Chicago Commission on Human Relations, if it happened in Chicago, you would file a source of income fair housing complaint directly with the city. If it happened in the suburbs, the Cook County suburbs, you would file it with a very similar commission at Cook County.
So it's your impression that the commissioners are viewing that as source of income discrimination? Because this is very unclear to me, whether or not denial of rental assistance is in fact a fair housing violation. I mean, it should be, and I agree with the principle. It's just I haven't seen it in action, you know, because I've seen a lot of denials, right? A lot of people are refusing to comply, and you know, supply this basic information. They don't hand in the documents on time, that kind of stuff. So, but you've heard that directly from them that they are enforcing this as a fair housing violation.
Yeah. So what I'll say, and thank you for asking that. And just for anyone who's listening to this, I want to clarify as I engage in this conversation, I'm not an attorney, right? So excuse me if I like misuse a couple words here. Like there's been no case law confirming this, right? This is all brand new. It's only been a couple months. There's no investigative findings or summaries that affirm this, but it is the opinion of the investigative staff that they will view this as source of income discrimination. No different than refusing to, you know, one thing we see with source of income discrimination is a landlord knows they can't discriminate, so they'll set up the inspection and then never show up. That's source of income discrimination. They've created a barrier that just blanket prevents you from renting. In this case, not completing that paperwork is a barrier. It's source of income discrimination. That's how they've stated they would view it. But you know, to your point, Aileen, you know, right now it's statements, it's opinions, but until we have the case law.
Sure. It's just a very interesting, I mean, it's a very interesting piece of information that's really valuable.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Yes, thank you, Michael, and thank you to our entire panel. Are there questions in the comments section, Alex, or topics that panelists want to raise before we close our meeting? I see.
Well, I would just really like to lift up our group. Thank you so much, so very much. This has been a very enriching conversation tonight. And I know that we will be having supportive agencies and organizations will be posted. Is that right, Alan?
Yes.
Okay, so people will know where to go for help if they feel that they've been discriminated against.
Yes, that's that information is in the comments section that was posted by Alex. And if Catherine, Michael, or Sarah, if you all want to give your phone numbers out before we close, or we'll just drive people to the comment section.
Sure. You want me to put that in the comments or in the chat, or do you want me to just
Oh,
say
sure,
it?
sure.
Okay. I'll put it down so it can be included in the comment section.
Well, thank
And
you.
I drop mine in the chat as well. Emails, anything, yeah, please reach out.
Well, thank you again. You guys have been tremendously informative. Alex, thank you so much for your excellent questions and moderation of our talk tonight.
Well, thank you all, and have a wonderful evening.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Yes, Happy New Year.
You too.
All right, bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Have a great night.
You too. Thank you.